But anyway, I try to make every day max fab, and because I'm here today, today's max fab, so Adam State has made my day. Vet Ready is a program, you see that, the acronym there. I came up with this because this is the bridge between non-veterans and veterans and how we transition into society and the things that I think are vitally important for employers, deliverers of higher education, and organizations that deal with veterans to understand that the veteran transition is not just like changing a job. We sometimes, somebody says, hey, I got a new job, I've moved from here to here, and that seems like, okay, well, you got a new job, you got to learn new people and those kind of things, but it's easy. Veteran transition is a societal jump that is a hyperspace phenomenon that is very hard. It's hard mentally, it's hard physically, it's hard spiritually, and it's hard emotionally. Now, if you think about it, I'm going to oversimplify this. I've got PhDs in sociology here, so she'll throw a rock at me if I miss this. And I'm going to really oversimplify this, but we really spend our life, and if we have a pie chart, our life is chunked into three things, right? We sleep, we do our stuff, whatever we do, and we work, whatever we define as our value thing, right? So when you're transitioning as a veteran, and those three things are kind of core, your work environment or what you do, or you become a student, wherever you're at, if you're, whatever stage in life you're in, what happens in that environment is 33% of how you function physically, emotionally, and those type of things. So for some context, I like to do this. So for some context, this is about 5 minutes, and there's another video behind it. And I do this because what you're going to watch here, and I want you to watch the pictures. The song is entertaining, but I want you to watch the pictures because this is really real. And those of us that served are going to identify with this immediately. This is really real stuff, and there's a reason why Toby Keith did this. There's a reason why he did 3 versions of this, and there's a reason why he did this version of this. He did this version of this not for the veterans. He did this version for the non-veterans. That's happening right now. Somewhere in somebody's house, that's happening. Did you notice the chain link fence? Just think about that. That metaphorically, think about that, because that's a real thing. I've done that a dozen times in my life. Did you see him put his game face on? It's like putting a football helmet on. When he put his beret on, you see him put his game face on. It's a whole different mentality. And out of all of that, the hardest part is staying behind. It's the families. That's the roughest piece of all of this. So this is a way of life. This is a new culture. This is what we do. It's not a job. It's who we are. We define ourselves with that. This next video is really a setup for all of this. I'm going to go into the finer arts of transition, my story. My disclaimer is that no veteran should speak for all veterans because we all have different stories. I'm going to speak in the commonalities for veterans, and when we get to the Q&A, please ask questions, because you're going to find people that are going to say things that other people haven't experienced, but it's our experiences collectively that lead to some of these challenges that we have, because we are a protected class, and we need to be looked at in that sense so that there's some level of accommodation. And, in the workshops, we'll tease that out in the workshops, which will be, I think it's fun, it can be emotional, but it's thought-provoking, and it's meant to bridge the 25-yard gap, and I promise you I'll get you to the story. I want you to listen to the words of this. This is Army basic training. I picked soldier stuff because I love soldiers. When you're a medic, you fall in love with Marines and soldiers because they're the ones laying on your stretchers and coming off the helicopters. And you get to see them at the moment of truth, sometimes their last moments. And it's an amazing bunch of men and women. So, but this is what they're made of. This is what we're made of. I'm an airman, and we have an airman's creed. This is a soldier's creed. This is what we're made of, and I really want you to pay attention to the words, because I'm going to talk about hot dogs here in a minute. When I get to the hot dog piece, I want you to re-reference the video. Now, who wouldn't want that person working for them, or in your classroom, or in your community, or to be your congressman or your mayor? Think about that. Who would not want that? That person, those people that they're ingrained. But these are my hot dogs. I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm a hot dog. Any of the veterans sitting in here are all hot dogs. So some numbers for you that should grab your eye. That 12% number, that's the number of veterans that make up the population of Montana. Colorado, 7.6%. Montana has the highest per capita population of veterans, and Colorado's not far behind, especially with Colorado Springs. The 25% number is the population of Montana if you add the veteran families in there. 1 out of every 4 people in Montana have some direct tie to veterans. So this phenomenon that I'm going to talk to you about is 25% of the population. So if the veterans have needs, they need accommodations just like anybody else. What are you doing societally? I always tell people in Montana, I said, if we ever got upset about something and are really driven, we could drive every election in Montana because we're that big of a voting bloc. We don't because, as veterans, we're driven a little bit different way. We don't get hyper-political normally. Some do. So there's your 25%. 50% is the percentage of veterans that leave their job in the first year because of this transition phenomenon. This 25-yard gap that I'm getting ready to talk about. This inability to be able to take the hot dog phenomenon and to close it up. 65 to 80% are gone in 2 years. Some of them never make it back. Some of them never make it back. And this is a sociological thing. This is where they go out into society after we finish, 4 years, 40 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. You go back out into society and things don't make sense anymore because of the 2 videos I showed you, especially the second one, okay? The hot dog. If you take a hot dog and you put it in a microwave and you microwave it for a minute, when you open the door, it looks like a hot dog. Looks like exactly what you put in there, but it's not. Its DNA is forever changed. When you're standing in the Navy, it's called the grinder. When you're standing there doing these creeds, you're being microwaved forever. You don't unmicrowave a hot dog, and you don't unmicrowave a veteran. So once that DNA is changed in us, and these credos are that way, and if you're not 15 minutes early, you're 15 minutes late, and all of these things that are ingrained in us, that when we reintegrate into society, cause us major problems, all the way up into the point of suicide. We'll talk about that. Now, there's a veteran responsibility on the reintegration side. The Department of Defense is not interested in a happy transition for veterans. They don't care. The Veterans Administration is too big and cumbersome to handle individual phenomenon. So the DoD does a very poor job of saying, here's some programs, sit in the room for, at the same time you're trying to move your family, find your kids' homes, do all these kind of things. They put you in a room for 8 hours, throw a bunch of pamphlets at you and say good luck. And then there's this chasm that's wider than the Grand Canyon of transition that you got to navigate on your own. And it's pretty, my 10 years out have been tougher than my 30 years in. And there's a reason why I put that picture there. Montana is #1 or in the top 5 chronically of substance abuse, suicide, mental health needs, those type of things. And we're 44th in services. I think you'll find it similar in Colorado. Now, if you look at other groups that need some level of accommodation, you'll find that they probably do better than veterans. This is because of the 25-yard gap, and I'll close that up for you guys, I promise. Inclusive versus exclusive. My friend said this. He goes, you know, the veteran experience is not so much about inclusivity, it's about exclusivity. And his explanation of that is that we're immediately excluded or kind of put off because of the perception of veterans by non-veterans. This is not a bad thing. This is not a scolding, it's a gap. And so in the workshops tomorrow, really will close that up fairly tight. It's pretty, I didn't realize the impact of it because I kind of conceived it and I did it in a church first, and it was amazing what came out of that. So, and I'm not going to tip my hand too much, so you'll have to do that later. You know, what's the difference between Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Armed Forces Day? Do we know that? Veterans can't answer this question, but I'd like to do this with the non-veterans. On Memorial Day, how do we fly the flag? Half staff? Till when? Most people don't know. You're supposed to put it back up at noon. Veterans know that. So on Memorial Day, when noon rolls around and half of them are up or half of them are down or all of them are still at half staff, you go, how involved are they? What do they really know? We pick up on these clues. These are subtle things that if you do them right, your institution has moved forward in the veteran experience. Now, what did that cost? Nothing. Nothing. Maybe a policy, maybe a little reminder. So these things are uber important. Oh, this is in Somalia in 1993. If you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, that's the time. That's it. So that's a young Dave, man. Look at that. All right. 1984, I got on an airplane on the 30th of November, and I flew from Sacramento, California to San Antonio, Texas. I got off the airplane in the middle of the night. I ended up in a barracks with 50 people from all over the world. And Dave was pretty squared away, right? Dairy farmer, a lot of skills, I had done, what I thought was amazing work up until the point I was 19 years old. And I ended up in this barracks. This is not the actual barracks. It's just a picture. And I ended up with 49 other guys. And then I got the kiss of death on day 4 of basic training. The kiss of death in basic training is to be made a student leader, because then you have no friends. Everybody hates you because you're yelling at them to get them to go, and the the training instructor, drill instructor, hates you because you can't have relationships. Now, you're in this really small group of people that, a lot of times they pick the student leaders based on how tall you are, how you look kind of physically, and then they call you out and they kind of figure it out. Anyway, day 4 I ended up as a student leader. So I was a squad leader, I had 12 guys. And from one end of a military barracks to the other end of the military barracks is 25 yards. That's the gap, 25 steps. And at the end of that barracks was a guy named Bradley. Bradley was a medic, actually. We went to school together, went to our training together and those type of things, and became pretty good friends. Stayed in touch for years. I've lost touch with him, but Bradley was from inner city Philadelphia. He didn't look like me. I didn't grow up with any black people. I knew nothing about being African American, growing up in Philadelphia or any of those type of things. Yet I was responsible for him and everybody in between there for this whole 25-yard gap. And one day Bradley's having difficulty making a bed, and so it's your job to hustle over there and help him out. Bradley says to me, I'm having difficulty making the bed. What came out of my mouth was something that I would have used at my kitchen table. Something that my uncle had said 1,000 times, something that my family had said, because it was my culture, right? But for his culture, it was inappropriate. And luckily, through the good fortune of some people that came to me and said, hey, what's up? And I said, well, that's a word we always use. Well, that's not a word that works really well with people from inner city Philadelphia. Okay, well, there's a gap. Well, luckily at 19, maybe I was raised right, maybe it was something to do with my grandmother. At 19, I figured out this whole world is full of 25-yard gaps, and this is the veteran experience. When a veteran comes out, there's this 25-yard gap. And we have to close the gap. The veteran's responsible too, but we have to close this gap. So I could have never led Bradley, and I could have never led another squad, or when I had my last job, I was in charge of 10,000 people across 5 states. I could have never led those people unless I closed the gap. What did I ask you when we met? What's your story, right? Everybody wants to ask veterans, thank you for your service. It's platitude. And usually it's done like this. Usually, actually, we do actually put a physical 25-yard barrier in there because everything in here is scary. Because if you really start to find out, then you have to do something about it, right? But we need you to do something about it. We need you to have that attachment, and we want you to know our story. Ask a veteran what your story is, and it starts off like this. I grew up on a dairy farm, and I went in during this time frame, and I stayed in for this long, and these are the places that I was at. You're not going to get gory war stories unless it needs to go there, unless they're comfortable with you. Maybe there's other veterans around. Maybe that happens. Maybe they haven't been to war. But unless you know that, you can't close this gap. So you come to an institution, you come to an institution of higher learning, you come to your first job, those type of things. This gap is real. And there's this assumption that veterans are strong and resilient and trained, and we've got all of these skills, and we're brave, and we're courageous, and we can handle whatever's in front of us. And the real answer is that we're scared, and we're lost, and we're broken, and we don't feel like we fit. And we need somebody to step into that gap and to close and have these conversations. So, societally, the two things that inhibit us from progress are fear and pain, right? We can talk ourselves out of anything. You said, are you going to go to the sand dunes? I kind of thought, if I have time, so I already threw time as a problem, and then, well, it could be cold. I don't know if I have the right jacket. There's 1,000 reasons not to do it. There's 1,000 reasons not to get in the 25-yard gap with veterans. Those are easy. Thank you for your service. And then you run away. What's your story? Starts the path to closing the gap. What do you need? When veterans are struggling at work, instead of 50% leaving, when you ask why the problems are, sometimes it's as simple as, I'll tell you my first job that I had to really get away from, because I'm a victim, I'm a statistical contributor to all that. My first job that I had to get away from was just the whole savagery and undisciplinedness of civilians. The meeting's supposed to start at 10. I'm there at 10 minutes before. I sit down, it's 10, 10:05, 10:06, 10:07. People are wandering in, it's distracting. Well, you're all savages. That's where it starts. You're not savages, that's what you are, right? That's your culture. And the veterans are not going to jump up and go, you're a bunch of savages, but they'll start thinking it. And then this happens, this phenomenon happens, and it's a values thing. Every institution has core values. You saw some of these values in these words that the soldiers use. Every institution has values, core values. Well, what if one of your core values is integrity? A lot of people pick integrity, but it's one of the Air Force core values. And you say, everybody needs to be integral, everybody needs to, lead by example, do the right thing when nobody's looking, and those kind of things. And then one day, the boss is screaming across the shop floor, everybody in here needs to have steel-toed boots and eye protection on. And he's in flip-flops and shorts with no glasses on. You know what veterans do? They pull their phone out and they get on Indeed and they start looking for a job. Because they're done. You don't get a second chance. Now that seems unforgiving, but this stuff is baked in. Because you know what happens when you're in a unit that doesn't have integrity? People die. We don't go to war for the country. We don't go to war for the flag. We go to war for the guy to the right and left of us. And it requires these things. These are high-functioning things. Remember the hot dog? They're hot dogs. So do they need accommodation? Yes, because here's what I'm not. I'm not gay, I'm not lesbian, and I'm not black. And those are just 3 examples. For me to lead or to integrate anybody into my environment, I've got to close this gap. That requires building a level of empathy and understanding that gives me the opportunity to make decisions that accommodate. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we move forward with this, because I really want to get to a Q&A piece of this, because being vet ready as an organization, which you guys have taken a quantum leap forward to do, being vet ready as an organization means that you've put this on a level that when the veteran walks through the door, when they see Kenai, and they get out into the general population, you probably have people pop into your office and say, I'm going to scream, right? Or this doesn't make sense. When you see that, when you see those people, there's a way to already have a conversation and say, so-and-so knows it, go have a conversation. He should push them back. Ideally in life, the 25-yard gap is a societal thing beyond the military. This is probably the solution to 99% of our problems that we have as Americans. And if we were all moving at 12.5 each, things get really easy. But you can be fearful to engage with veterans because you're scared that something's going to happen, and the only thing that's going to happen is your life is going to be enriched, and we are going to start to feel reintegrated, needed, wanted, and a sense of purpose. This thing, and I hope when we get to the Q&A, that some of you will talk about this. Sense of purpose is vital to our mental health, right? It's a human need anyway, right? You need a job and you want to have, you want to contribute. These are basic things that we need. But this sense of purpose that goes from when you get up every day and you put a uniform on and it's got a patch and it's got an American flag on it and you have a mission and you got a set of orders and you know what you're doing and somebody's explained to you your role in it and you understand the whole domino effect and how you play into all of that, and you've got your buddies in your group and you do that all together, and one day that's all yanked away from you and you're not sure that you're even going to be worthy anymore. And we're looking to our new family to fill that gap. And so that requires both sides acquiring tools, both sides having conversations, and then normalizing. And then when you start to normalize, because veterans, once veterans are explained kind of a new rule set, and then they get the respect that goes along with that, they can normalize. And when they normalize and they can get back into a family, then their mental health is better. And I'll tell you why that matters. Are we a protected class? It's debatable, but I will tell you that there's certain things that we qualify for just based on some of the ribbons that are on our chest, right? I mean, if you have a certain campaign medal, it automatically gives you privileged, more points for job applications and those kind of things. It just offsets you for it that way. Could you imagine the world without the American Disabilities Act? I've already talked to federal legislators about writing something in the American Disabilities Act to this specifically on workplace accommodation for veterans and the type of training that leaders of veterans need to have so that we get out of this 50 percentile thing. And I'll talk about some of the more aberrant things that can come from this. The American Disabilities Act was written because people didn't close the 25-year gap. I'll hire you because you're a good secretary, but you got to figure out how to get your wheelchair in and out of the building. So we've had to do this. It's not novel. It's just we need to open our eyes to the veteran thing. And quite frankly, veterans, the perception of veterans kind of doesn't, we're not all missing arms, we're not all missing legs, but some of us have deep disabilities because of the sacrifice that goes along with that. So I talked about the non-vet role. Vet ready, I've kind of talked through what that means in the 25-yard gap. Subway sandwiches. So I thought that the easiest job I could do was to manage about 13 Subway sandwich shops with about 100 employees when I got out. How hard is that? I had 10,000 people doing nuclear weapons, was my last job, right? It's about medicine, military, and nuclear weapons. Any regulation there, right? Well, I found out that sandwich artists are not airmen, and some of them have longer rap sheets than resumes. And it was a dynamic, and I did a lot of closing the gap with them. But what I found was I was used to, tell me what I need to do, right? Give me the mission, give me the people, and I'll go do it. And I had a boss that wasn't about that. And so as I started to move things, and I think that the military guys will know that after I've been in E9, I know how to move things. I can make things move. We're magical that way. Just stuff happens. And he didn't respect me. He didn't respect my service. He didn't respect my time. He didn't respect where I came from. He didn't respect my education. And it was an ego fight. Maybe I intimidated him. That's quite possible. But instead of us working together and him getting a really, really robust company beyond what he already had, we had to part ways. And part of that was my fault. I had some learning to do. And so I left. And then I went and worked for a municipality, and I was working in a fire department. It was about as close as I could get. There's a brotherhood there. There's some retired military guys there, and I was working for them. But they were paying me peanuts. So there was an imbalance there, a financial imbalance. And when I had the conversation, they said, well, I don't think we can get from here to there. So I quit. A year later, they hired somebody for twice my salary and figured it all out and said, oh, well, maybe he was right. Didn't do me any good. Did the next person, just fine. So as you kind of think about that, I think that we probably all have an example where there was a gap, there was a negative outcome, and then when you at least ran it through your head and closed the gap, you went, oh, I should have done this, or I should have asked that question. With veterans, as soon as somebody says, I'm a veteran, I just got out, I did 20 years, I did 5 years, whatever it is, when they do that, we should automatically tell them your story. If you have we should be able to articulate, I'm not a veteran, but I listened to this guy named Dave, and Dave said to open the door for you to come to me with any frustrations that you have. Frustrations in the classroom, accommodations for assignments, those type of things. Tell me what's going on outside of the classroom that can affect your classes. I was telling Keynote today that I wrote my last paper in my master's degree. I wrote it in Iraq during the surge in 2008, and I was the senior enlisted medical guy for the whole country. And my professor wrote me back, and she said, this isn't your work. What's going on? And I hadn't told her. I said, well, I'm in Iraq, and I'm trying to finish up, and this is what I'm doing. And she wrote back A-, and that was the end of it. So it was good, and I had performed well to that point in time, and so there was some accommodation in that sense. But you know what? Not until she asked me what my story was did I close the gap. So I should have told her. I should have told her when I was leaving, but I didn't. My fault. She actually opened the door on the gap to close that. Or it could have been a problem, right? I could have gotten some grade that would have been a showstopper, which would have crippled me because, I was finishing up. So it's just a small example. All of those things apply. They're very super important. Whoop. Imagine that. Imagine that. Think if you're interviewing somebody for a job and they're in a wheelchair and they're deaf in their right ear, you already know what their office space needs to look like, what the fire evacuation plan needs to be, what the elevators need to look like, what the bathrooms need to look like. You already know all that. If you're thinking about hiring them, you're already thinking about where they're going to sit in the office, what you're going to tell the rest of the staff, make sure that their left ears are exposed to everybody so that they don't have problems hearing in the work. You're going to do all that. When a veteran comes to a job interview, all you do is you look at their resume and go, I don't understand anything about what it takes to drive a tank, and they go into the pile. And sometimes we throw away the best employees, the best students. We throw them away because we don't want to take the extra time to close the gap. And once you close a couple of gaps, then it becomes natural, right? Then you look at it and you go, oh yeah, I got to learn how to read Klingon here and to get through those kind of things. So just imagine the growing pains that went along with this. Now, Vet Ready is set up where it's not a financial burden. This is not about buying things and doing things. It's about policy changes, conversations, and then how you approach things initially. Okay, the workshops are going to tease this out on this phenomenon of what the gap really looks like when a veteran transitions, what it feels like to walk through the door, because it is scary. That day you take off the uniform is a scary thing. I took the uniform off, got in the car, put my kid in the car, and drove to Kansas City for 3 baseball games just to hide, because I didn't want to, I just didn't want to think about it after 30 years. So this year I'll be 60 next July, and I will have served half of my life on active duty military and half my life as a civilian, as a 60-year-old man. That's a pretty microwaved hot dog, isn't it? Oh, this thing just wants to be over. For all of you academics in here, I know that slide on the right you'll love because it'll just drive you nuts. Because I put this slide up here because in the veteran experience, you've got to figure out how to make that work, right? And I looked at that and looked at that and looked at that. And for the longest time, I kept trying to design the one piece to go in there. And you can't. It takes 2. It takes 2 pieces to complete that puzzle. The one piece, you can't do that. You could make a piece with the 2 C's, but there would be a gap in there, right? You've got to do something with that, with 2 pieces. And the reason I want to use that, as a visual is, it takes both sides to get to success. I love that. I don't know where I found that. I use that in other presentations. I love that because it makes people think. This is so self-explanatory because that's my barracks, right? When I was a squad leader, those hands weren't joined. By the time I was finished, they were joined. It was painful for me to learn some things. Changed my language, changed my jokes. God, I thought I had really good jokes. They were terrible. It was terrible. I had, over the course of my time in the military, I would go home, and every time I would go home, it was harder and harder and harder because I was socially really out of balance with my family because they were in this bubble of how they thought and how they approached things, and things that they thought were funny were hurtful. And so, would anybody know what that number is? This is the VA's number. So anytime the VA puts out a number, just times it times 2. You'll find that I'm a little critical of the VA. I'm only critical of the VA because it is such a big bureaucracy that it can't function at the individual level. It's really hard to do that. And so you'll go into some communities and the VA is so high functioning and they do really well, and you go into others and it's just a mess. So by the time we finish with this presentation and the Q&A, if we do the full 2 hours, 2 veterans will have taken their lives, right? And the number is probably closer to 44. You'll hear 17, it's kind of all over. But why does this happen? Why do veterans take their lives? And I don't want to make this, gory and scary, but here's the reality. You've been microwaved, and you are what you are, and your identity is built around who you are, what you wear, and the people that you're with, your shipmates, your battle buddies, your Marines. It's who your airmen, your wingmen. It's who you're with, and you identify with all that, and you have this inner circle, and it's protective, and it's a society inside of a society, and you're yanked out of that. And people do similar things, and they make these transitions, which is sometimes as difficult initially, but they happen because there's common language. You can move from Texas Christian University to Alamosa, and there's common language because you came from higher ed to higher ed. When you come out of the military and you go to higher ed or you go to a job, there's not common language because everybody's not up in the morning in a pair of shorts running 5K, singing Jodies and going up, running up and down the streets, and then after that busting off into your little groups and going and doing whatever. But that doesn't happen. So you start to miss that. Well, when that's not there and the gap doesn't close and you start to wander, you start to make friends with your 3 best friends. When you have PTSD and moral injury and you don't own it, you let yourself be a victim. So that's this guy. You make 3 friends really quick because they're the best 3 friends you'll ever have. They always show up. They never complain, and they're non-judgmental. Jim, Johnny, and Jack. Beam, Daniels, and Walker, right? And so this will happen, and you will isolate. Veterans with PTSD, little higher propensity to have substance abuse, but out of these 22, there will only be 1 or 2 that have really hard combat trauma, PTSD. The rest of it's moral injury. I talk on moral injury. I'm published on moral injury out of our university because it's really the bigger conversation. I will tell you that it is fair to assume, and this is probably, I just talked to one of my female vet friends. She said the number's low, but the veteran number is 1 in 4 females that serve, and we have 500,000 female veterans now. 1 in 4 of every females that serve have been sexually assaulted. You can make that assumption. She told me it's 90%. And she works with female veterans. So these are things that we just come with, right? But you can be helpful. It's not something to be scared of. You can be helpful, and you can use these things to close the gap. So I don't want to dwell too much on this because this is not where we want to be, and veterans are not showing up suicidal, but it can't end here. And it's so easy to close the gap. It's so easy to step forward. People always say, "Thank you for your service." Well, if you're really thankful for something, if your neighbor moves your snow because you broke your ankle, you make them cookies, right? You take them something. You do something. But yeah, we tell veterans thank you all the time, but we leave this gap laying around, and this is what we need. If you really want to do something beyond thank you for your service, it's this. Ask the story. Figure it out. Close the gap. Make the space. I thought you'd like this slide on the left. It's sociological, don't you think? You don't think? You can use it in your class. The reason the teddy bears are there. The reason I like that, and this, obviously I pulled it off the internet. The reason I like this is because veterans need to take transition on as the enemy because we don't, it is the enemy. And so we have to make friends with it. But to make friends with it, we need to be in an environment where it's conducive to kind of do that, to kind of learn. And so, saying things like, that's just a military thing. To brush that off, now think about it. You're a hot dog. Your DNA has changed. It's part of you. Do you have any tattoos? No. A Navy guy without tattoos. That's an anomaly. But see, I know that now, I'm probably going to pick on you. That's all good. Keynote, you got any tattoos? A Marine without tattoos. I don't have any either. That's weird. But so we have to make friends with that. So to identify the enemy and to make friends with the enemy, we need some help. And societally, that's where that's at. This slide is, the reason that I put this here, I know this slide was built for the financial inequalities between men and women. And if you get me started on that, I'll go on and on and on forever because I'm a huge advocate for women and women leaders and those type of things. And it probably comes from being raised by strong women. But what I did there is the non-veteran can be on the left or the non-veteran can be on the right, depending on the situation. And you notice the difference. One's looking down and one's looking up. And a lot of times, the veterans feel like they're on the left, and they feel like they should be on the right. And I'll explain to you why. Veterans usually take jobs that are 2 levels organizationally below where they were operating. So I worked as a chief executive. My last 3 jobs was as a chief executive, HR, as a command chief. I had 3 command jobs. Then I went and did Subway sandwiches. That's probably 3 layers below where I was at. We're happy doing that. We're good soldiers. We just want to be part of the organization. We don't want your jobs. We don't want your jobs. So, that whole thing of, when you're talking to kids, bend a knee, get at eye level. Just do that with the veterans. It's a very respectful thing. And when you ask the why about veterans, I see some north and south heads, I love it. When you ask the why and what's your story, and you learn that, I will tell you institutionally, and this is what I teach executives when we go through this, institutionally, you've got to take your badge off and you got to put your heart on. You got to take your badge off and you got to put your heart on. You cannot look at veterans like, gosh, if I hire this guy who's been through formal leadership, the development that I got from the Department of Defense is unbelievable. I mean, it's all civilian level development. I mean, the highest level of development that you can get. I've never gone into a place and said, I want to be the mayor, I want to be the CEO, I want to do those things. But what I have said is, I've been where you're at, level of empathy. Here's some things that I did when I was where you were at. That hasn't gone over well. It hasn't gone over well. And I'll give you the ultimate example. I was the disaster manager for a whole hospital region in Montana. In 2018, the CEO of the hospital asked me what my biggest concern was. And I said, I've spent a lot of time in Africa, and I've looked at the hospitals that we have, and I said, I really think that the country and the world is probably on the verge of a pandemic. This was in 2018. And I said, and we need to prepare for a pandemic, and we have some infrastructure things that we need to work on. And they told me to go away. In fact, it upset them. So I went and worked on it on my own, like a good chief, and I got a lot of stuff. And it was all sitting there, and I took the whole community of Billings, Montana through a pandemic exercise at the end of August of 2019. We didn't even know Wuhan existed. The pandemic came, the infectious disease doctor and I got together, gave them recommendations for the first 6 months, and they kicked us out of the meetings. So I left. I went and ran the COVID operations for our university, which was an amazing experience. COVID and academia. There was a lot of gaps to close there. It was pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. So with that said, this is really a precursor to the workshops, but I'll give you a little teaser. In the workshops, this stuff that I'm talking about to clarify is going to end up on a whiteboard. There's going to be words on a whiteboard, and when it's done, there's going to be a big gap in between the two. And I have an example in the slides of the last one that I did. It's emotional. If it doesn't move you, you're not human. Well, both sets, veterans and non-veterans. If it doesn't move you, you're not human. The fact that anybody is sitting in this room, the fact that the university has stepped forward to give me the platform to kind of lay this stuff out, and then to really put it into workshops, and after we're done, you can take it, you can call me whenever, and I'll give you some suggestions. Don't throw me out of the room. I'll give you some suggestions for how to move forward. You've got Kenai here, or whoever's in Kenai's position, they should be able to articulate that, but you need to pick off your veterans too, and ask the story, and ask where you can do better. We do it all the time. We do it when we're recruiting students. When we have people that come in that are in this DEI space, and they have issues, we're all ears. And it's no different. And it's no different. And if you take somebody that is really, gosh, where was I? I just got back from Sweden. In fact, I got a little bit of a jet lag. And the Swedes speak perfect English, so it's really easy to navigate. And we were in town square in Malmo, it's an older city. If you've been to Europe and you enjoy walking on cobblestone for hours and hours, it's that kind of environment. And one of the people staying at our hotel was trans. And he was having a conversation with whoever he was going out with that night. And I was listening intently, because what they were talking about was their family rejecting them, how they couldn't go to a party. They were going through all of this stuff, and I thought, the 25-yard gap was in my mind. I thought, so nobody has sat down and said, where are you at? How do you, because it's an opportunity. This is an opportunity. What we're doing here is opening the door for an opportunity for all of us to grow. So the 25-yard gap is not a veteran thing. I do it because this is my point of authority. I can speak to this, but there's no reason why I can't change the noun on the front of ready and be anything ready. And institutions should sign up for that. The only work that it takes is just your personal time to ask the question. I've grown more by asking questions of people that have either lifestyles or gender or whatever that I can never be, and listening to that, it changes my whole approach on things. So as long as we live with assumption and bias, we'll be 100% wrong almost all the time. And so this is to close the bias. The workshops will close the bias. And once we close that bias down, we're much, much better. That's the information, the websites, all the goodies. But I really want to open it up to Q&A or statements, especially from the veterans, on how you feel, where you're at, maybe even some examples of your previous work, because veterans they normally don't go into an inclusive place and say, I'm a veteran and I need something. It's the genre. We don't go there because I don't think that we think we fit into that space. And I think when in the I piece, because remember it was DEI and B. So I used to always tell people, you can let the woman be in the all-man's country club, but at the 19th hole, if she's sitting in the corner and can't have drinks with the guys, then she doesn't belong, right? She's just included. And so veterans need to belong. And to belong is by opening your eyes enough to say, this isn't easy for you, is it? Because the answer is usually no. And because we're hot dogs. So if nothing sticks, you'll go, you're a hot dog. Don't run up to veterans and say, Dave said you're a hot dog. They won't, unless they've been in here, but yeah. So I appreciate the time. It's a good precursor. I hope that you can make the workshops. If you're watching online and you got a chance to come tomorrow to the workshops, please do, because it's very interactive with whiteboard stuff. There's some visuals there, stuff that you can take pictures of and just kind of hang on to, and I'll leave some things for you. But I want to open it up to Q&A and any testimonials, maybe personal experience and that type of stuff. Sailor?
My name's Edwin Kroschel. I'm actually originally from the Valley here, and I joined up in the Navy 2 weeks before September 11th, actually. did 20 years in the service, been all over the place, but I've probably I've been around the world at least 4 or 5 times, I think, but never got the Magellan Award, though. I guess as far as getting... Magellan Award, so if you're on a ship that goes around the world in one run, basically. So that's going all the way through the Cape of New Hope and the Tierra del Fuego and such, but it's a fun cruise. You get to see the entire world. You get all the port visits along the way. But I did half of it, and then we had to switch because the war kicked off. But yeah, as far as being out, it's been tough, at least for me. The Navy, I'm sure all the other services are the same way. We have our own language, and I'm trying to remember which words to use, and whether deck and bulkhead and things like that. I always have to, and then military time, although I've been lucky with that one. Most people seem to understand that one. But yeah, there's it's kind of akin from when I went from the States to Japan. I had a huge culture shock, basically, and getting out has been about the same kind of effect. Just trying to get used to being a civilian or a person again.
When did you get out?
August 1st, 2022.
So you've been out a couple years then, yeah?
A couple of years, yeah.
What was your biggest challenge?
Trying to get set up. I mean, I kind of knew where I wanted to go, but I had to be able to shift everything out I was in Washington State, and I was trying to get back to here, or try to figure out where I was going. But yeah, actually, one of the problems I had was I took terminal leave, so I was on vacation, and the intent was to come home, but I couldn't even get a household good moved, so I had to sit there and wait for almost an extra month before I could go home. So, but yeah, they give you kind of online classes, kind of like a PowerPoint, really. This is stuff that you might expect, but it's all from people who've never served, and then next thing you know, you're trying to find your way out and where to go, what paperwork you need to file. With me, I got lucky. I found a disabled American veterans group, and they were actually able to file all my VA stuff, at least on that side. So I got that sorted out right away. But nobody knew anything about retirement, not a single person. I had to figure out my way through that one by scratch. It was just had to look things up, and like with me, I was single, which there's almost no information on it. I found documents that had one line that said what I needed to do, and it took forever to find all that information, put it together. But.
Yeah. It's pretty lonely.
Oh yeah.
And it's actually harder. It's the hardest part of serving is this when you get out thing. So, and if you think about what in the top 5 most stressful things that a person goes through in their lifetime, death of a loved one is first, and moving is like third. And we've all moved, right? And that's stressful. Now think about having nothing. His stuff is locked up. He can't get it. He's got to find a place to live. He wants a job, or he wants to be doing something. And you lost all your buddies, right? Yeah. There's no shipmates or any of that type of stuff. So that's his story. So yeah, and acronym soup.
Yeah.
Because we talk in acronyms.
Oh yeah.
and we digress quickly. I mean, if we all went up into the corner right now, we'd be an acronym. So you guys would be going, what is that? Right? So that's why I made you say the Magellan thing, because you say that and then people don't. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
That's it for now. I guess I don't want to steal the show.
No, that's what we're here for. Kenai. I asked Kenai his story today too. He's got an interesting story.
Thank you, sir.
Kenai's a Marine. It gives you an excuse for anything you screw up.
I think it's all the crayons I've eaten.
That's
sir.
right. See, he admitted that. The other services call the Marines crayon eaters. That's another thing. You put military guys in a room, and I've had this happen, and we'll get going at each other so hard that I've had people say, "You guys need to break it up," and that's just what we are. We all love each other, and we'd all be bleeding on the floor for each other in 5 minutes, but we take some body blows at each other. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, crayon eater, jarhead. Those are probably the 2 big ones. I think it's actually the movie Jarhead itself where they describe the definition as an empty jar ready to be filled by the drill instructors once we shave our heads.
Yeah.
And then, of course, just the fact that our heads get shiny once we shave them. But yeah, I joined the Marine Corps in 2018 on October 15th. I was a Hollywood Marine, as it's called. We went to San Diego. and
Terrible
did
city, awful place.
Yeah. One of the big things that they tell us over there talking about transitioning into the mindset and everything is we're right next to the airport. And so it creates a real sense of homesickness for a lot of the recruits who go out there to San Diego because you're running in these dirt fields as you could do the PT and the exercise, and there's the runways right next to you with these planes going back and forth. You don't know where, but you pretty much always imagine it's home. And if you get caught staring at one for long enough, then eventually a drill instructor comes up to you and it's like, well, if you want to go home that bad, then go chase it. And you could be running for however long they deem necessary after this plane. And talking about like the vocabulary and everything, yeah, the exact same thing in the Marine Corps. Since we're part of the Navy, we use the same terminology: bulkheads, causeways, portholes, not glasses. So it's definitely a different world. But then I went through Marine Corps combat training, then through 29 Palms Communications School. Pretty much anyone who does know about 29 Palms knows that there's not much there. It's desert, rocks, sand, and it was actually an Army base, and the Army deemed it unlivable. So the Marine Corps took it over and said, we'll use it. And that's where actually one of our biggest training exercises is held every year. It's called ITX, Integrated Training Exercise, and it's basically where almost every Marine Corps unit that's not currently deployed goes to 29 Palms to conduct mortar fire, artillery fire, air drills, infantry, snipers, whatever asset we have available, and team up together to learn what each other does and do cross-training. After 29 Palms, I went and joined my current unit that I'm at, and then went to OCS back in 2022 after I graduated. And I ended up getting injured at OCS, 12 stress fractures in each leg, extending through my knees and pelvis.
How many miles were you running a week?
Between 70 and 80 is
So-
what they have recorded.
So I knew the answer to this because we talked about that. But think about that. Part of your job is to run 70 miles a week. It's part of your, I mean, it's a condition of employment. And if you want a promotion, right, you want to make more money, how many pull-ups? What's your minimum pull-ups?
23.
You got to do 23 pull-ups. This is to get promoted. This is just to advance. You got to do 23 pull-ups. What's your in your run time?
18 minutes and 3 miles. So 6-minute miles.
And it doesn't matter if you're 35 or 25. You got to do that. That's just to keep moving up.
And we only just found out that sit-ups are bad for you, and we switched to the planks.
Don't start me on that. Don't start me on sit-ups. There's many broken human beings over sit-ups, so that's not good.
Yeah, no, and it's the mileage is probably more just because it's up to the will of the instructors that you're with to encourage you to do better by having you run from place to place if someone were to mess something up. So mileage could be up somewhere up in the hundreds a week, just depending on what was going on during that week, what phase of training we were at. And then, so I came back here. I was talking to Mr. Nordel about it, about how when I got out of OCS, I was really conflicted about where I was going to go and what I was going to do because I was trying to figure out my injuries and the process for getting back to OCS. And I had thought that I would be starting a new career right there, and now all of a sudden my OCS dream was kind of up in smoke a little bit. So I decided to return to Alamosa and give back to the school where I got my bachelor's degree from and see what I could do to help out here. Now I've signed a new 3-year contract with the Marine Corps, and they got me back, and I'm serving as the communications section head for my artillery battery for all of our training and at-home purposes. And that's pretty much where my story is at right
Yeah,
now.
no, and I appreciate that. So there's 2 points in here, and I'm gonna pick on you again too. There's 2 points in here. One is he has no problem going back, and 70 miles a week. He has no problem going back. He wants to go back because he has battle buddies. He's got purpose. Wears the uniform. He's a hot dog. He did 20 years in the Navy, where you were out 11 months in sea, home for a month, and back out for 11 months. He just got an email that said, we'll take you back because they're short people. And what did you say to me? You said, I thought about it, but I think that I've been out long enough that I forgot all the bad stuff. But you're considering it. There's a gap there. This is what, when we're in your institutions, when we're with you, this is what we need. And so the ask is to have the conversation. Because when people have a gap of any type of inclusivity, you got to feel them. And veterans are people too. People think we're rock hard. And we're actually pretty squishy people, or we wouldn't do the work we do. None of us want to fight. It's not about going to war. It's about having what we have and doing what we do so that we can do these things. And we're at a critical point in time, so. Anybody else? You're the most important one right now. What's your story?
Let's see. Sorry for showing up late, by the way. My bad.
That's all right.
My name's Peter Costas. I'm actually assistant professor of art here. Been here about 2 months, so that's been pretty nice. But I was also in the Navy. I did 5 years, so not nearly as much service. But I was on submarines. I went in right out of high school, like 2 weeks after I graduated. Went in 2011, and then I was really weird. I knew I wanted to be submarines. I was initially supposed to be a corpsman. I was supposed to go with the Marines, and I, weirdly enough, was afraid of having to, like, because the corpsmen, they don't get to pick their specialties, and I was thinking, oh man, they're gonna make me like deliver
Pharmacist,
babies or something.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's what I did. That was my first job.
oh, really?
Delivering
Okay.
babies, yeah.
Not that it's bad. I just
Yeah.
was thinking, I don't want to join the Navy for that. So I volunteered for subs, and in doing so, transferring from corpsman to submarines, normally you're supposed to get a big bonus, but because I requested to volunteer, I basically got rid of my own bonus. So that should have been my first clue.
But they only told you that you lost your bonus after you qualled and got there, and then they said,
Yeah, they never told me I lost
Right.
it. They just said, oh, it's on the way.
Yeah.
Well, every time, and then I was like, yeah, it's not on the way.
We've all lived something similar. That's
Yeah. And then, so I went through, boot camp at Great Lakes, and then Great Mistakes. And then, sorry. And,
They've all got names.
and then I did a year of submarine school in Groton, Connecticut. And that was actually kind of fun. It was really close to New York
Yeah.
City. So I used to take the train there all the time. And then I was stationed in Hawaii, so that was kind of cool. But I was stationed on a fast attack
So I was
submarine.
going to say you're on fast attacks, yeah?
Yeah. And I did, what did I do? 2 Western Pacific deployments and 1 East Pac, which is a pretty easy, those are really easy, but the West Pacs were pretty long. It was like 7 to 8 months on a submarine, so we would hit Liberty ports, but they were very minimal, and a lot of times you have to like be on duty when you're in a foreign port, and yeah, you're there, but you maybe only have like 24 to 48 hours total to go see a place, and then you have to like have a shipmate buddy, like a Liberty buddy with you, and it's usually like someone you, like almost all the time, it's someone you like really don't want to spend your time with. So that was kind of I really wanted to travel the world a lot, and I got to go to cool places. Like I went to Japan 6 times. I've been to Guam way more times than I wanted to, maybe 12 times or something.
I did 2 years on Guam.
There you go.
It gets small.
Yeah, it's very small. It's a very interesting place, but
Do me a favor.
sure.
I had to do this the other day, being a non-Navy guy, but I've lived this. Explain to the non-veterans, explain to them what hot racking is.
Oh, sure.
Because you do that in the submarines.
Yeah, that was my whole time on a sub. So, I mean, I went E1 through just E4 because we were really bad quotas, but I was hot racking the entire time. So that on fast attack submarines specifically, we don't have enough beds on the boat for the amount of people that go underway. I was on an LA class, Los Angeles class submarine, and it's, I think, rated to have about 100 people. That's like 120 is like what it's rated to go out to sea with, but we would routinely go out with like 200 people. So we would have to you'd get assigned 2 different racks, or 2 beds, sorry, and you'd have 3 people per 2 beds, and you'd sleep in shifts. So like one guy would be sleeping, one guy would be on watch, and then you get off watch and have to go wake the other guy up, and then go to bed where the guy was just sleeping.
So it's still hot when you
Yeah,
get in.
yeah. So that's where hot rack. It could be a really gross thing potentially.
It's
Lots of
it's a badge of honor, though.
I guess I don't know if I've ever heard it be a badge
So
of honor.
there's so many things about the Navy that fascinate. They do what's called Navy showers, which is you turn the water on, you get wet, then you shut the water off, and you put all the soap on you, then you turn the water off and you get it off, and then you get the hell out because there's somebody else coming. So there's no taking a shower. It's just, so these are the kind of things that in our environment. So now think about you're in a room, you're in an institution, you're this guy, right? And somebody is whining about the fact there's no mashed potatoes on Thursday normally at the student union. He's like, what? And you want to go, let me tell you about hot racking, and you want to get emotional, and it makes you emotional because our level of tolerance, our level of tolerance is so high for stuff that we have no tolerance for things that are totally inconvenient to people. So during COVID, I always told people, I said, we don't have any problems in the United States if toilet paper was our issue. Because if that was where our needs were, we're doing pretty good because the rest of the world is fighting over water, right? So, yeah.
Very cool.
When'd you get out?
I got out 2016, so I did, and then well, to be honest with you, I was like a real hard charger my first couple years in. I was super gung-ho, what we would call a dig it. I guess the Marine Corps would call a high speed. And then, I don't know, it's really hard to be very into it on a submarine because the amount of work that they make you go through and the amount of just straight up BS that you have to deal with all the time caught up with me. And I, to be honest, kind of just was like what we call a shitbag for my last 2 years in, and I really enjoyed being a shitbag actually. And that was my best time in, and so I got out, and then I was backpacking in Europe. I spent like every dime that I saved in my savings account backpacking through Europe, just sleeping in.
Did you find that valuable for your mental health to transition?
Probably, I think so, because I knew I wanted to go to school and start something, but I was kind of unsure, and I think it was because I'm an artist now, and I went to school for the arts, and I had been interested in the arts my whole time in, but I think there was a lot of pressure to not pursue the arts when I was both in and getting out,
Right.
and I think my time in Europe kind of solidified what I really wanted to do, and I just kind of pushed away a lot of the fears, and then got into school. So
I think that maybe by accident you did something that was really, really smart that I recommend to everybody when they're getting out, is take all of your terminal leave and don't put pressure on you. If you have finances, if you've got some money saved, don't put pressure on yourself to jump into a job and to take your time. So remember that when people are They walk into the office and go, I want to get started, because we want to get back into this purpose thing and get started. So you probably did. So in the Navy, when you show up on a submarine is a boat, and then the ships are ships. So don't ever call the ships boats, and you get in trouble for that. But when you show up on the boat and you're not trained, it's like your first day. Now think about this. Think about this in an inclusive space, offending people. They call you a nub.
Oh, yeah.
A nub is a non-useful body. Can you imagine showing up and you go, Seaman Nordel reports his order, and they go, you're a nub. And you're a non-useful body. That's an acronym. That's how you're classified. Think about that. But it's a form of, it's low-level hazing, right? Because I have a friend that teaches leadership, and
Okay.
he was a sub-officer, a TAC sub-officer. And they're nubs too. When they show up and they're ensign, he's a nub. And he goes, as soon as somebody called me a nub, he goes, I'm getting qualified in something. It motivated him to move forward. But you think societally, can you imagine if we labeled somebody a nub? It's unacceptable, right? But this is real. This is real culture. So it would not be unnatural for him to meet somebody that's getting started on something and go, oh, you're a nub. And they go, what is that? You're a non-useful body. And then there's a problem because he's a hot dog. That's his new DNA. That's his new language. You talked about it.
Here, I'll prove the dig it.
Go ahead, Doc.
I was gonna have, you said something,
Oh, sorry. I was gonna prove the dig it thing. I got a tattoo of my qualification here when I was 20.
All of us don't have tattoos except for you. Good job.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, you said something about a charger, and then there's a different term before you told us that you were a shitbag for a couple.
Hard charger.
Hard
Yeah,
charger,
hard
yeah,
charger.
I don't know what this means, so I'm very curious in knowing what those terms mean.
Yeah, I'll start off and I'll let him finish. As you go through, especially based on your rank and then kind of where you fit, like when I got into command billets, like your guys' command master chiefs, they used to call us cake eaters. Because by the time you're in the command billets, all you do add is functions. You're eating cake all the time, right? So they call you cake eaters because you're a different form of a nub by then. But so he was talking about being a hard charger, and I'll let him explain it. But this is actually it's a phenomenon that if you've ever been a hard charger, you'll bring it to your civilian workspace, and it can be a problem. So.
Yeah, I didn't know. I think hard charger, I don't know if that's a civilian term or I kind of grew up with the term, but.
Air Force is high speed.
Okay,
They
that's
call
what I
it,
thought, yeah. So it's just someone who's like, I guess what you would say, like buys into the culture of the Navy, buys into the system of it, like is really gung-ho about it, really like wants to be, like I wanted to do 20 when I first went in. And then to be honest, it wasn't this, I liked the submarine and I liked going on deployments weirdly enough. And I liked my job. It was the culture that I found I hated. And that was kind of what led to me getting out. And like, actually, yeah, so the nub thing, I haven't heard that in years. The Navy actually tried to like get rid of that term. So they started calling people non-quals, and they'd get you in trouble if you used the term nub, even if you were a nub. So you would actually you would get in trouble for saying it. So that happened to me a couple times. Yeah, so weird stuff like that. And then like we couldn't, before you got what we call your fish or your, like basically you're qualified in submarine warfare, which means you're able to, like in the worst of scenarios, if like everybody on the boat is dead, you can essentially like operate the boat on a very rudimentary level. I mean, I don't know how true that would be, but that's what they basically had us go through. Yeah, well, like you couldn't watch TV for like a year. Like if you were in cruise mess and like looked at the TV, you would get like delinquent, like people would scream at you. Like it was like you really felt like for a year before you got your fish, like you were a second-rate citizen kind of thing. Honestly, I hate to say it, but it was a whole different environment.
Badges matter.
Yeah.
Ribbons matter. Titles, I mean, it's the whole hierarchy. We work in this, Napoleon put these charts, these organizational charts, they were all created by Napoleon, and they've lasted till this point in time. And the only reason that Napoleon created those charts was he got sick of the same 4 captains telling him the same information. He said, no, I want one person telling me. So he built those charts. Well, we live in those, the military people live in these Napoleonic charts. And we need at least a mental organizational chart of how things work. Go look at your organizational chart in this institution. There's dotted lines, and there's like, well, you go this high in the chart, and then you got to move across 3 boxes, and then you got to go down, and then over, and then back up. That's called savagery, and where we come from. You know, everybody's savages. They're undisciplined savages because the chart doesn't work. So I appreciate that. Thanks,
Thank you.
Sailor.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Anyone else?
Anything from the non-veterans?
Non-quals?
How about growing up as a... I'll let her talk, and we're probably getting on time, but yeah, I'll let her. So I'm going to talk just before you start. So this is very important because the GI Bill fits. You know, my kids went to college on my GI Bill. And my kids tell me that they wouldn't trade me in a military brat for anything short of one thing. And the fact is, they go, you know, Dad, you have friends from when you were this high that you still have. And they go, we don't have any of that. So my youngest went to 3 high schools, I think. Both my boys are Eagle Scouts, and I think they were in like 97 scout troops because they just moved all around. And it was, you know, so there was just no commonality.
I've been to over 25 high schools, elementary schools, all of it in my life. I never really grew up in the United States. I was born in Washington State, my dad's first big duty station after he qualled and everything was subs. And then we moved to Italy, and then from Italy to Guam, Guam to Hawaii, Hawaii back to Guam. My parents unfortunately split. I lived in Montana for a little while. And then I moved to Japan with my dad, and then Singapore, and then I came to Adams State from Singapore. So I have spent my entire life moving since I was 3 years old. The longest I've lived in the United States would be Alamosa, Colorado now. And it's difficult growing up in the military lifestyle. I loved it. I miss it every day. You get an experience like no other kid would in the world.
Do you have some of the same challenges as those of us that were active duty?
Absolutely, for sure. Very different because a lot of the kids going home for holidays. My dad was still living in Singapore. He didn't have the capability to get me there for Christmas break because it was like $1,000, $1,500 to send me there and back here. So I stayed home for Christmas in Alamosa. I stayed in my dorm room. I had a very kind boss that I worked with here, and he invited me over for Christmas. And you miss out a lot of time with your parent who is in the military. My dad would deploy for 9 to 12 months at a time. Longest I've gone was 5 years without seeing or talking to my dad because he was deployed. My dad is officially retiring, though, this year after 34 years of service in the United States Navy as a Command Master Chief. He's been SS, SW, IW, AW, so he's done everything under the sun, and he's been in since he was 17 years old. Yeah, he's alphabet soup.
You'll get to know him better now.
Yeah, it's an adjustment right now.
Yeah,
He's kind of an ass.
yeah, because he doesn't have sailors to push around.
Yeah, he has no idea what he's doing right now. He's enjoying retirement life for a little bit, though, so.
It's good. I'd like to meet him. Yeah, for you submarine people, Admiral Cecil Haney, I got to be friends with him because of my nuclear world. So, and you guys have to. Everybody knows Admiral Haney from the sub world. So, yeah, he's a great guy. I think there's probably time, unless we want to keep going. But workshops tomorrow. We'll expand on this, and it's just the next couple of layers. I think that you'll really enjoy it because it's the intimate piece. So especially the veterans, if you guys can make one of the workshops tomorrow, you can contribute in a way that's extremely valuable. But so we've closed the gap. We've already taken some steps. I don't know if we did the whole 25 yards in here, but we've closed the gap. We start some introspection. We start to develop some strategies in our heads to better create, structured engagement. And then once you create, you see how it makes you feel good when you tell your story. I mean, we all love to do that. And you see how just by hearing the stories, if you stop and go, what was that? I mean, she used 4 acronyms. She knows all the quality. She used 4 acronyms, and you go, I don't understand any of that, which is fine. But it's the polar opposite of being the nub. He's the ultimate fish, right? So you know, this is just, we speak a whole different language, and we have to learn to speak, we have to relearn the civilian language and the civilian speed limit and how things go. So, yeah, this is great. If anybody's online, I'll leave that information up there if you want to video it so people can get at it. And then we'll see you tomorrow, for sure. Any last? All right. This was good. It's always good for me. Thanks, yeah.